Here. Good morning. Welcome to our adult Sunday school class. Zoom out from here because we're going to be going somewhere. So one thing I appreciated from Brother Tim's prayer this morning, don't know if you'll caught it, he said, "We're ready for you to send your son back." Yeah, that could happen at any time, and I'd be a-okay with that. So appreciate the heart there with that. So we are on the wind down of the book of Job. We will be picking up in chapter 39. Job 39. As we are going through the Bible story, the age of the patriarchs, gone through Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. And so here we are about 1588 BC. Just as a refresher, death of Joseph about 1591 BC, 65 years before the birth of Moses, and that was 145 years before the Exodus. And so in that 145 years, we got the 140-year gap between the events of Job and the death of Job. So these 80 years of Moses are split, 40 years in Egypt, 40 years in Midian, right across from Uz, where Job is. So they had 40 years or so together. So if the events of Job are a few years after Joseph died, he died in 1591. So if we put Job's events about 1588 BC, he dies 140 years later, about 1448 BC, 2 years before the Exodus. So that all kind of nestles in and fits quite nicely there. So stop, zoom in for a moment. So way over on China on the Far East, we have in 1588 BC, while we're in this Middle Bronze Age 2A, China is being led by Emperor Taigeng of their Shang dynasty, their second dynasty. We have over here in Egypt, Pharaoh Sewaj-Kari of the 13th dynasty during their second intermediate period. We're after the high point with Joseph's pharaohs in the Middle Kingdom, before the next high point of Egypt in the New Kingdom with Ramses II and all of that, which will be during the time of Solomon. So we have in Assyria, up in the north here, King Urisim II. Well, further south in Shinar and Sumer, Mesopotamia, we've got Isin's king, Dami-Kilishu, their last king. Well, further south in Larsa, we've got Rim-Sin, their last king. Back up north here in Babylon, we've got their king, Apel-Sin, father of Hammurabi. And over here in Phoenicia, in Byblos, we have King Yakin-El. So with the year being about 1588 BC, the Lord's people here in Egypt, that puts Levi at 117 years old right now. And in the line of Christ, we got 3 generations alive. Judah's son Perez would be about 86, his son Hezron about 73, and his son Ram about 15. So we've looked at a lot of cool science stuff dealing with hydrodynamics, aerodynamics, fluid dynamics, then dealing with light and energy. And I love this concept that God started creation with let there be light, and recognizing that light is energy. And so he basically flipped the breaker switch and turned on the universe. And everything from creation for that is energized by that movement of that light energy. So pretty cool stuff there. And we see all of that being brought out, the things mentioned in the book of Job, we are still discovering more and more to be true to this day. So with that, Job 39, and once again, we're not reading every chapter and every verse. We did that a few years ago. Just pulling out some highlights to consider. Job 39, this is the Lord's response to all of that happening. But right before I dive into Job 39, one thing I want to show you, let me zoom in right here, go back to here, go back to here. Right over here in the land of Israel, we have that spot of dirt called Tel Arani. Tel means mound. Well, what's so special about that? And by the way, this is... So there's Hebron. Over here is Gaza. Of course, in the news right now, there's Beersheba and stuff, all that there. So it's right in that area. So what's so special about this Tel Arabi? Oldest city gate unearthed in Israel. This was just published Friday, November 10th. And there's a picture of it. Excavators there just discovered this city gate. Of course, gates were the entryways into the city. So they've got their walls and they have their gates for the entrance. They just discovered this city wall here in this area. And they recognize it's about 5,500 years old. So this puts it to about 50 to 100 years after the Tower of Babel. This is way before Abraham. So this is very early in the time of Genesis here. So we see that. And look at the size of these stones they were building it with.
I'm just saying, on the top, you could big giant.
Yeah.
Boulders, like, wow, how did you get those things over there?
Yeah. So imagine this. Within 50 to 100 years after the Tower of Babel, we've got all these cities and urbanization spreading out. Yeah. Not only that, see, there he is digging away there. We've got vessels from Egypt here in the land of Canaan. So even back then, and these date to the early dynasties, like Dynasty 1 and 2, and the very early days of Egypt. So here they had interaction with each other back then, which of course we've already explored that when we went through that time period. So yeah, that city life was even earlier. Here's what was thought to be the old, see that what they just discovered, what was reported Friday, is now recognized as the oldest city gate in the land of Israel. What had the record before that was over here in Tel Arad, which was a couple centuries later. And there's the what they've discovered there that's still there today as they unearth it and dig all that out. So, and there's the tent that they're protecting themselves from the sun under as they are digging away. So I thought that was a little something spiffy to share. Yeah.
Why is it underground? Why is all this? I mean, I just think I have a memory.
Sure. Here's a funny thing. When we lived in Tehachapi, we were 4,000 feet above sea level. What you would think, okay, you're closer to the sun, further away from the ground, the bottom ground. Why do things get so dusty 4,000 feet up? It was amazing how much dust we had in Tehachapi. And so the answer to the question is, as things are abandoned and unkept, dirt and sand just piles on. When we looked at things in Egypt, like the Sphinx, that was discovered buried under sand. It wasn't just sitting there and people walking on, oh, look at that. I wonder what the story is behind that. No, that actually had to be discovered. And so a couple of things happen. These tells and mounds are actually built upon each other. And so what that's fascinating too, that, okay, rather than just bulldoze it or get it out the way, whatever they used for bulldozers back then, they said, yeah, that's a lot of work. Let's just build right on top of it. I mean, so we see, so it becomes a mound where civilization just does that. And so it's a combination of that, the building upon of itself, that things have to be uncovered. And in fact, the heartbreak sadness of it is archaeology is a destructive process. They have to destroy something to get to what's underneath it. Right. So that's why they have to do such an articulate job of documenting and a meticulous job, photographing and reporting, and not everything gets published. So not all of these things get presented that are found. So yeah.
That's what they said. Some things in Rome, there's some of the churches were built on, there's something underneath there.
Oh yeah.
You know, like,
oh yeah.
You know, like worrying about that too, but yeah.
Oh yeah, and it happens in England too, where they discover ancient Roman things underneath them. Yeah. And so, yeah, so fascinating stuff. So that was in the news. So that brings us to Job. Right before we get to 39, let's look at the end of 38. Didn't touch on this. Here's God speaking to Job, kind of reminding him of some perspective here. Verse 39. Of Job 38. Job 38, verse 39, God challenges Job. Can you hunt the prey for the lioness, or satisfy the appetite of young lions when they crouch in their hiding places and lie in wait in their lair? Who prepares feed for the raven when its young cry to God? and wander about without food. So, of course, appreciating the recognition that animals of nature know God. And God himself says, the ravens cry out to me for food. And where are you, Job, in all that? Where are you when all these animals are living their lives under me and in interaction with me and engagement with me? Did you have any part in that? Are you providing and preparing and providing for them? No, he says, basically says, when he's asked the question rhetorically, who prepares feed for the raven? I do, not you. I'm doing all these things that you have no clue about, all these things that are so far removed from you. And so you might want to rethink how you are challenging me and approaching me. The good thing is Job was going to God. That's first and foremost, and he can work with that. We don't want to ever stop going to God. But God is reminding Job perspective here. Remember who you're dealing with. Remember, if I've got them, and what did Jesus say about God and his care for the animals? Not one sparrow falls to the ground apart from your Father. But do you know where you are more valuable than sparrows? The Father's saying the same thing to Job right here. If I do this for the ravens, how much more am I doing? Not just will I do, but am I doing for you? Even though sometimes it's hard to see. So I thought that was definitely worth sharing and pointing out. So again, real quick, the land of Uz, where Job is. Here's Midian, where Moses spends those 40 years later on. Here's Mount Sinai, and here's the land of Uz, south of Edom, where all these events of Job are taking place. And so Job and Moses will be neighbors for 40 years or so in the last years of Job's life. So this is where all that conversation is happening. So that brings us to Job 39. One thing I wanted to bring out from here, a similar note on nature, go down to the end of the chapter, verse 29. Job 39:29. From there, he tracks to let me back up because we're talking about the eagle here. Verse 26 of Job 39. Is it by your understanding that the hawk soars, stretching his wings toward the south? Is it at your command that the eagle flies high and makes his nest on high? He dwells and spends his nights on the cliff, on the rocky cliff, an inaccessible place. From there, he tracks food. His eyes look at it from afar. His young ones also lick up blood greedily, and where the slain are, there he is. So I liked about this notion of the eagle starting in verse 27. So the eagle flies high, makes his nest on high. There are a lot of references. A lot of nations claim the eagle, like America does. Eagle has landed on the moon. That's touched on in Obadiah and whatnot. But what I like here, so the eagle's way up high. So he's way up high on these rocky cliffs. And yet from those high inaccessible places in verse 29, from there, he tracks food. Well, how do you track food from way up there? God says his eyes look at it from afar. So God knew, imagine that, about this concept of an eagle eye. The eye of the eagle being sharp and able to see far away and able to do that. Verse 30 is interesting too. His young ones also lick up blood greedily, and where the slain are, there he is. Eagles are actually related to vultures. And so where Christ says, when people challenge him on some things, he said, where the body is, there the vultures are going to be. Ew. But yeah, that's kind of the point. So if you want to know where some of these things are happening, here's what you look for. We kind of flip that and we say, follow the money. Where the money is, that's where the greedy bloodsuckers are going to be. And that's where the trouble's going to be. And so follow the money trail. But God, again, is making this point about nature and God's awareness of nature when Job is focused on somewhat, of course, understandably, what's going on in his own world. And God's, again, point here is not that Job's world is insignificant. It's that if God cares for all of this outside of Job, he certainly cares for Job and Job's world too. So any reactions to 38 and 39 there from the book of Job? That brings us to Job's response in chapter 40. In verse 3, Job answered the Lord and said, behold, I am insignificant. What can I say in response to you? I put my hand on my mouth. I have spoken once and I will not reply, or twice and I will add nothing more. So here Job saying, oh, wow, this was a big reality check. Okay, I'm going to stop now. I've overstepped my bounds. I'm going to. So good awareness. But again, Job was not wrong in wanting to bring his concerns to God. He just kind of forgot some perspective on the fact that God has all him and all this covered. So God's not done with just pointing out some things. So God speaks again. Let's pick up in verse 15. Let me say right now, what God's about to talk about is not a hippopotamus. This is a dinosaur. Listen to this. Verse 15. Behold, behemoth, which I made as well as you. He eats grass like an ox. Behold, his strength is in his waist, and his power in the muscles of his belly. He hangs his tail like a cedar. The tendons of his thighs are knit together. His bones are tubes of bronze. His limbs are like bars of iron. He is the first of the ways of God. Let his maker bring his sword near. Indeed, the mountains bring him food. The animals of the field play there. He lies down under the lotus plants, in the hiding place of the reeds in the marsh. The lotus plants cover him with shade. The willows of the brook surround him. If a river rages, he is not alarmed. He is confident, though the Jordan rushes to his mouth. 24, can anyone capture him when he is on watch? Can anyone pierce his nose with barbs? Now, there are many who have tried to write this off as being one type of animal or another, but when you put it all together, there ain't no animal currently in existence that this all fits. And so, yeah, and they did not miss the ark. As much as I love the Far Side that shows the dinosaurs looking and seeing the ark going, oh crud, was that today? Great stuff. But no, dinosaurs were on the ark. Dinosaurs left the ark. Dinosaurs lived after the ark. Noah's flood was about 2953 BC. And so here we are in 1588 BC. So 29 minus 15, so we're like 1400 years since the ark, and there are still dinosaurs that God is speaking of in the present. So keep in mind, in our English language translating these things, the word dinosaur didn't exist until the 1800s, not until after we had words like dynamite and things like that. And so what they referred to earlier was oftentimes dragons. And so kind of a broad category, but we'll see more on that in the next chapter too, specifically. But any reaction on behemoth there in chapter 40?
My Bible says it has been identified with the hippopotamus. But it nonetheless describes an animal of great strength, which though feared by man, is used of God for his own purposes.
There we go.
So
sometimes the commentaries are spot on, sometimes they're not, but that was, yeah, I appreciate that. So behemoth was impressive. Get ready. 41. Job 41, verse 1. Job, God challenging Job, can you drag out Leviathan with a fish hook and press down his tongue with a rope? And by the way, just like it wasn't a hippo in the last chapter, this ain't a crocodile, alligator, crocodile thing here. Verse 2. Can you put a rope in his nose and pierce his jaw with a hook? Will he make many pleas to you? Or will he speak to you gentle words? Will he make a covenant with you? Will you take him as a servant forever? Gonna have a pet here? Will you play with him as with a bird and tie him down for your young girls? Will the traders bargain for him? Will they divide him among the merchants? Verse 7. Can you fill his skin with harpoons or his head with fishing spears? I love verse 8. Lay your hand on him. Remember the battle. You will not do it again. Behold, your expectation is false. Will you be hurled down even at the sight of him? No one is so reckless that he dares to stir him. Who then is he who opposes me? Who has been first to give to me that I should repay him? Whatever is under the entire heaven is mine. He goes on. I will not be silent about his limbs or his mighty strength or his graceful frame. Who can strip off his outer covering? Who can pierce his double armor? Who can open the doors of his face? Around his teeth there is terror. 15. His strong scales are his pride. locked as with a tight seal. One is so close to another that no air can come between them. They are joined one to another. They clasp each other and cannot be separated. His sneezes flash forth his sneezes flash forth light, and his eyes are like the eye of dawn. From his mouth go burning torches, sparks of fire leap forth. From his nostrils smoke goes out, as from a boiling pot and burning reeds. His breath sets coals aglow, and a flame goes forth from his mouth. In his neck dwells strength, and dismay leaps before him. The folds of his flesh are joined together, firm and immovable on him. His heart is as firm as a stone, and as firm as a lower millstone. When he rises up, the mighty are afraid. Because of the crashing, they are bewildered. 26. The sword that reaches him cannot prevail, nor the spear, the dart, or the javelin. He regards iron as straw, bronze as rotten wood. The arrow cannot make him flee. Sling stones are turned to stubble for him. Clubs are regarded as stubble. He laughs at the rattling of the javelin. His underparts are like sharp pieces of pottery. He spreads out like a threshing sledge on the mud. 31. He makes the depths boil like a pot. He makes the sea like a jar of ointment. Behind him, he illuminates a pathway. One would think the deep to be gray-haired. Nothing on earth is like him, one made without fear. He looks on everything that is high. He is king over all the sons of pride. So who here has seen one of these in the zoo? No. Again, nothing on earth today fits that description. So this was something that was alive and well at the time of Job, 1588 BC, 1400 years after Noah's Ark. So let's look at some of these descriptions here of this Leviathan. So in Job chapter 41, Leviathan, talking about in verse 13, he's got double armor. 15, those strong scales that are tight as a seal, no air comes between them in verse 16. Verse 18. So some of this might, maybe, no. Verse 18, his sneezes flash forth light, and his eyes are like the eyes of dawn. So this, I'm sorry, Job chapter 41. Yeah, Job 41. God is telling Job, reminding Job about Leviathan. So, pull this out here. There we go. So again, verse 18, his sneezes flashes forth light, and his eyes are like the dawn. Basically, this creature goes, achoo! Light comes out of his nostrils when he sneezes. That's some. From his, verse 19, from his mouth go burning torches, sparks of fire leap forth. Now, I've had some bad breath in my day. This is flaming fire coming out the guy's mouth here. And God is not being poetic here. Job is a book of poetry. It's written in poetic format, the whole book. But God's whole point here is not to be flowery with Job. His whole point is to be a wake-up call and reality check to Job. So he's talking in reality here. That's kind of the purpose here. So God is reminding Job of this creature who has burning torches and sparks of fire coming out his mouth here. Clearly, ain't no crocodile or alligator we've ever heard of or seen. Nostrils, verse 20, from his nostrils, smoke goes out. Boiling pot, burning reeds. Verse 21, his breath sets coals aglow. Flame goes forth from his mouth. So clearly, this is some fire-breathing thing. So fire-breathing dinosaurs / dare we say dragons are real, or have been real, or were real? Yes. Yes, they are. And yes, they were. Hey, Sister Minnie.
Not just in Shrek.
Not just in Shrek. Sister Ashley.
So when we look at the fossil record today, where did they live in relationship to where man lived? Because there's dinosaur fossils, like in Montana and
Oh, yeah.
places like, but there are some states that have no dinosaur fossils, so how do you kind of map that out?
Wouldn't it be similar to what, we don't have Siberian tigers here in California,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
that's just, maybe you have a better answer.
Actually, I love the question and thank you both for this. Here's the key, especially when we're talking about fossils. When we look at fossils and where these fossils are, to Sister Ashley's point in question, we're not seeing where they lived.
Right.
We're seeing where they died.
It's from the flood.
Sister Leslie just nailed it.
Right.
It is from the flood that moved them around. That's why we have the fossils of sea creatures in the mountains of Montana. And so, but what does that have to do with the dinosaurs at the, like this fire breathing thing at the time of Job, 1400 years after? Did it fly? Don't doubt it. Yeah. And so with that, what did I want to bring out about that? The fossils, the fossilization process. How do you get a fossil? Well, number one, something has to die. Number two, sediment has to be slapped upon it so fast that it prevents, and then harden, it prevents scavengers from getting to it. It prevents the atmosphere from deteriorating it. It's basically preserved. Ice age, yeah. Yeah, the ice over it, yeah. And so it's an instantaneous, very quick time, massive event. There are no, pretty much the fossils we have are from Noah's flood and from that event. So
deeper down to the ground.
Yeah, exactly.
You might be petrified to stone.
Yeah.
That is.
We had Sir Leonard Woolley excavating the city of Ur. I've shared this story before. As they're digging and seeing different societies and older societies, they get to this layer. Okay, we're not seeing anything anymore. We're not seeing anything anymore. So the guy says, okay, looks like we're done here. And he says, nah, keep going. So they keep going, like, we're not getting anything, we're not getting anything. So 11 feet later, they discover a society even older than everything. But why this gap? And so he smiles and kind of asks his crew, what do you think? What do you think? What would that be? And they're like, I have no idea. And so his wife comes along and says, hey, honey, what do you think? She looks at what they're presenting and she says, the flood. Where there were, yeah, where was I? Yeah, exactly. And so, but back to 1588 BC and this fire breathing thing alive at that time of Job, that was not fossilized. That died, however it died, and however they died out, and their remains were not preserved. Their remains were eaten up by scavengers, like we just saw in the early verse, where the body is there, the vultures will be, and the deterioration from the atmosphere and all that stuff, all these things that happen. And so therefore, what we see preserved in fossils, that had to have a fossilization process that doesn't happen anymore. Fossils aren't being made on a regular basis anymore. Something catastrophic happened to create them.
That's a good point that I never thought about, because in order to explain this, you'll hear, scientists today say, well, it was just a hippopotamus or an alligator that the things that we know of today, or they'll say it was just metaphorically, how they interpreted, this animal, or it was a poem or poetry or whatever. They kind of, but you're right, because I think about, just in my little experience, traipsing around the wood with my sister, we would come across, some old bones or something of a, squirrel or whatever. They weren't preserved they were old and scattered, and you could tell that time had was taking its, effect on them. And that's very good point compared to a fossilized record, and that's something that never struck me that way. You're right. In order for something to be fossilized, it would have to happen very quickly. Because if you, like say, when my sister and I would go out and find, birds or whatever, scavengers, there'd be bones over here, bones over there, or they were just crumbly little things, so that's sometimes you couldn't even tell what it was, so
Right.
that's a really good point that I had not thought about, which I can understand why we would in schools would teach like the millions of years, because
Mhm.
they have to fit the timeline to match the proof, not just go with what the proof says, which is we had this event on the earth that caused all this fossil.
Yeah. Yes, it's okay to ask a question. Clay's got one even from the devotional.
Well, I always wondered when I saw these pictures of the Asian thing, where did they get the description to draw dragons?
Well, he was just describing and Joe.
I know, but I mean, with the Chinese around that river. Maybe.
Let me do this.
And he couldn't put them on the ark because they're afraid they'd burn it down.
That's a good point.
Okay.
The little sea dragon is a cartoonish. Why are you reading dragons? We're gonna see. So why?
Actually, they don't do that until puberty.
Correct.
That's the one you see in the one that's the non-one you see.
Existed. Time for an educational video for the moment.
The very old one, the one I.
We have the cartoon.
No, it wasn't a cartoon.
Oh, wow. Well, we do have the cartoon if anyone's interested.
It was my cartoon.
Ashley has the cartoon. I've actually showed this before.
Before then, they were called something else.
But while we're here, figure let's have some fun.
But then if there were dinosaurs on the ark during the flood, and they got off the ark and they lived with men after the flood, then shouldn't we find some written historical documentation of that? Surely people would write about that, and indeed they would, and they did, and we have a lot of accounts of this. But remember, the word dinosaur is a brand new word, not invented until 1841. But before then, they were called something else. We find this name in pretty much every single culture all around the world. What were they called? Dragons. And we find these legends. They're legion. They are all over the place, pretty much every single culture. Now, some are embellished, of course, but many of them describe known types of dinosaurs. And even the honest evolutionist knows about these. Watch this little clip from the Discovery Channel.
There is one creature remembered in the legends of almost every human culture that's ever existed. A creature depicted with remarkable similarity by the Chinese, the Aztecs, even the Inuits, who live in a frozen land where no reptiles are found. Even they have stories of this animal, the dragon. Cultures from different continents, people who had no contact with one another, yet all of them have stories describing the same mythical animal. Could it be these stories were more than myth? What if we discovered that this creature that haunts our imagination had once been real?
Now, of course, I'll try to explain those away with an evolutionary worldview, but the point is they acknowledge the legends. And there are so many of these. We have whole books on this issue. Just a few examples very quickly. St. George is said to have killed a dragon around 275 AD. And the description of the dragon that he killed, this is of a dinosaur known as Baryonyx. And in that very same region, we do find bones of Baryonyx. A city in France, renamed in honor of the dragon that was killed there, described as bigger than an ox with long, sharp-pointed horns on its head, maybe a triceratops of some sort. Marco Polo, the man, not the game, reported in 1271 AD that the emperor in China used dragons to pull his chariots in his parades. Which, by the way, if I was the emperor and there were dragons around, they'd pull my chariots too, because that's awesome. All right? Well-known historians like Aristotle and Herodotus, they reported seeing flying dragons. Herodotus may know this in his writings, where he went to go see these winged serpents as they flew for Egypt. And he said he saw them. And he says they were like snakes, they were reptilian, and their wings were not feathered, but they were membranous, like the wings of a bat. The Historia Animalia, a very well-known old secular science book, said dragons were still around in the 1500s, but were rare by then and fairly small in comparison to those older dragons. We also find carvings and drawings all over the world that appears to show man with dinosaurs. A few examples of those. Here's a piece of ancient Egyptian pottery, seems to show two long-necked dinosaurs. A Roman mosaic from the 2nd century, again, two long-necked dinosaurs. I'll go over to northern England, visit Carlisle Cathedral, see the tomb of Bishop Bell, who died around 1500, and there are brass strips around his tomb with carvings of animals on those strips, and some of those carvings look like known types of dinosaurs. Or go to Cambodia, visit this temple built around 1,000 years ago, zoom in on the column of this temple, yeah, what appears to be a clear depiction of a Stegosaurus, the dinosaur with the plates on the back. Bring it back closer to home, over in Colorado, here's a pictoglyph of quite possibly a Triceratops. You got the big body, plated back of the head, 3 horns. Of course, the evolutionists say, no way, that's just a really bad goat. Those Indians were terrible artists. If you look above, they know what a goat looks like. All right, they were confused by that. But it gets a lot better than that. Over in Utah, close to there, we find another cave wall drawing of what is clearly a sauropod dinosaur. You have the long tail, the 4 legs, the neck, and the head, a very, very clear depiction. Also close to there, another cave wall drawing of a pterosaur of some sort. It would appear with those distinctive features, the bump on the head and the webbed feet. Another cave wall drawing of a different sauropod dinosaur, enhancing you can see it better, but there you go. Here's a fun one to end on as far as this subject goes. This is a creature given to us by the Aboriginal people, and they call this creature Yaru. And they say Yaru was a real creature, it was a real menace. And in this picture, they're showing us the time that Yaru ate one of their friends. And they're trying to get their friend back or get revenge or something like that. And Yaru looks a whole lot what we call a plesiosaur. And guys, if we had time, we could just go on and on and on for a really, really long time. There's so many of these. And again, even the honest evolutionist knows about these. And they're going to be consistent. They need to try to deal with these from an evolutionary perspective, and some have tried. And it gets interesting when they try. One quick example. Have you guys ever heard of Carl Sagan? A few of you have. Okay. Because Carl Sagan was a popular scientist back in the day. He was a brilliant man and a staunch non-believer and a staunch evolutionist, but definitely brilliant. And but he believed in hardcore evolution, and so he knew about these dragon legends all over the world that sounded like man with dinosaurs. And he said, "We know that can't be true." But he said, "Then how do we explain all these legends of man with dinosaurs? At least what appears to be in these accounts." So he sought to answer that question in the book, The Dragons of Eden. And this was the hypothesis he put forward. He suggested, he said, well, we know evolution is true, he said. And we know that humans evolved from small mammal-like critters that lived millions of years ago. And these small mammal-like critters, these small mammal ancestors of ours, they lived with the dinosaurs millions of years ago. And the dinosaurs were so big and terrifying that the memory of the dinosaurs imprinted itself onto the brain of our small mammal-like ancestors. And then as those things began to evolve onward and upward, they kept passing on that memory to one thing over the next over the eons of time. And then some humans back in the day still had that vestigial leftover memory from their ancestors. And when those humans went to sleep at night, that memory would click on. Those humans had dreams of the old dinosaurian world, and they will see the dinosaurs their ancestors saw. Then they would wake up and write about what they saw or draw pictures of what they saw. And he said, that's how we get all these dragon legends that sound a lot like man with dinosaurs.
And if you believe that, yeah. Well, you have to come up with something, right? So, yeah. So not part of today's lesson plan, but since the subject came up, I figured might as well, since the topic came up. So Sister Minnie, to your question, does that kind of fit what you were asking with different people in different places drawing these things?
Yeah, but I just don't know far back in Chinese culture goes. You know, we go back to what the Chinese jewelry.
Oh yeah, we've got yeah, they're in their second dynasty right now,
Wow.
when they have Emperor Tai Gang of the Shang dynasty is ruling at the time of Job here. Yeah, you betcha.
So they made drawings down.
Sister Leslie, then Brother Peter.
So since when God made the animals on the dinosaurs were made at the same time and.
Dinosaurs were made at
God created
creation.
them?
All everything that ever existed at creation. Now that's going back to their kind. Now from the kind, which the breakdown that we use of the animal kingdom is, we got animal kingdom and plant kingdom. So it goes kingdom, then phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. When the Bible says kind, we kind of recognize that to be family. So kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. So while one family was on the ark, after the ark, and as they repopulated, you had different families break out into genus, different genuses, genii, and then different species. So not every species existed at the same time, but the family did. So from male and female feline on the ark, from there we get the bobcats, lions, and the kitty cats. And so we got the bear kind, the dog kind, the horse kind, and all those things. So yes, dinosaurs existed at that time. Yeah, they exist from creation, weak, but then all these different branches that we see spread out from there, but all reproducing after their own kind. So does that help with that, Sister Leslie?
So.
Hey, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna help clarify.
So help clarify on this topic, yeah.
Yeah, so Leslie, what he's saying is, on the ark, there was not a lion, there was not a bobcat, there was not a kitty cat, there was not a,
Yeah,
Puma.
just the lions.
right, it was one type of feline. And after they disembarked and they started to reproduce, then you have the different genetic things that happen to make lions, to make.
But they're all
tigers,
still felines.
But they're all
Together.
still feline. Same thing with wolves and dogs, they're all in the
Canines.
same, but it started with a kind, and that was
Yes.
something that I had to learn too, because I'm thinking, when I think of the ark, I think of this huge thing with one of every type, even mosquitoes. And,
ants,
you know, and
butterflies,
ants, but it was a lot purer than that because it
Yeah.
came from God. It was perfect, right? So yeah, we teach our kids in school, you know, in Sunday school, the ark, and you know, here's 2 giraffes, here's 2 elephants, you know, but it wasn't quite like that. So I'm sorry, I just wanted.
No, I appreciate that.
So basically like with the reptiles.
Yeah. So Brother Peter and then Sister Peggy.
Because of their extinction, because of the flood, and because there's probably those sea creatures people back then that lived after the flood, but as you see, you know, time goes down, the food chain goes limited more, and so the dinosaurs there wasn't enough dinosaurs for them to eat a lot, and then now even in the sea creatures, the big whales are gone, you know, and those big animals are just being extinct. So, you know, going down the line, so.
Yeah, so what we recognize as the descendants of the dinosaurs, the dragons, all that, looks to be the last records we have of them are about 500 years ago. Marco Polo and all that stuff. So we don't have a lot after that. So, but Brother Peter's good point. This is not evolution, but there is survival of the fittest is a concept where we do have adaptation within our DNA. We adapt to things, but we don't spawn completely different kinds. One kind never crosses over to another. Sister Peggy.
Is that where we use the word kindred?
Yeah,
So.
kind,
I-
kindred.
I'm saying my kindred,
Yeah.
I'm saying my family.
Yeah,
Blood. And I didn't realize, like,
yeah,
kind and then.
kind and kindred. No, I like that. Yeah, and we are kindred spirit. Yeah, in the family of God. Yeah.
And this is just something silly I want to comment on. You know, the movies that we see, they get a lot of their stuff from the Bible,
Yep.
a huge part of it.
Oh yeah.
And, so I find that even the evolution, whatever, you know, it's in.
It's funny how we see God and what they do, but they just can't give God credit, but we know. Okay.
Oh, okay. Why did, humans? So there's only one kind,
No, we got different species.
a species of human?
Oh, absolutely. Homo erectus, Homo sapiens. Homo is the genus, and sapiens or erectus
Well,
is the
Now,
species.
that, isn't that along the evolution?
No, no, nope. Evolution is from one kind to another. As evolution is from monkey.
Cro-Magnon and all that?
Evolution is from monkey to human. Cro-Magnons were human. Australopithecus was not. And so, yeah. And you had these different things existing at the same time. There's this place in Georgia, not America, but Georgia, former Soviet, where Dmaninsky, where they found close to the time of the Tower of Babel, they found all these different hominids, different variations of human in existence at the same time. And there's this guy, a PhD, Todd Wood, who was in the movie Is Genesis History? I've actually corresponded with him. And one of the things that he has studied is how, when you take all these ancient skulls, you know, might be monkey, this might be human. There are he's analyzed the different characteristics of skulls. And what he sees is there's a clear line of separation between these have these characteristics, they're monkey and whatnot. These have these characteristics, they're human. And so whether you've got different species of human, they're still human. And we've got different species of monkey, they're still monkey. And there's a clear line of separation between those, and there's nothing in between.
But we know that anything.
No, that's not necessarily the case either. It's just a case of there were different variations at the time. And what is today is what has lasted to this point in time. Yeah, Neanderthal. Yeah, Neanderthal is human.
Mhm.
When I was in school, they were teaching us that the put down man.
And that was a hoax.
And yes, it wasn't, but they were teaching it in school.
Oh, yeah.
Saying this is the link between the monkeys and people.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And the evolutionary lineup of anthropology completely changes every 10 years or so, because they can't get it straight because it doesn't work. And so, yeah. But funny, the Bible was right all along. It just simply said what it says, and the Bible hasn't changed, and it continues to be true and continues to be the explanation for everything we see and everything that has been seen and has been recorded. It all finds its source right here. No, not yet, because you still have another question to ask.
Well, it's real quick.
Yes.
Yeah. Why did God refer to Ezekiel as son of man?
Great question. I'm glad you picked up on that.
Repeat that.
Why did God refer to Ezekiel as son of man? And
That's usually Jesus.
Yep. Jesus calls himself son of man. What's the similarity? What's the difference? In Jesus's case, when he calls himself the son of man, he is specifically referencing a passage in Daniel that is an end times reference, where the Father is the Ancient of Days. And in this vision of Daniel's, the Son of Man goes to the Ancient of Days and receives from him and then goes on from there. When Jesus takes on calls himself Son of Man, and that's in capitals in that context, he is saying, I am that guy from Daniel. And that's what upset the Jews so much, is his claim to that authority and that position. Now, bring it back to Ezekiel. God the Father talking with Ezekiel is clearly not calling Ezekiel that person, and it's lowercase. So what does it mean? It's an intimacy thing. Remember, man is made in God's own image. And so God is calling Ezekiel, you're the Son of Man, you're the inheritor of these things that have happened and been passed down. And this is just my interpretation. And so it's an intimacy thing. You are the Son of Man. Here I am burdened for man. You are the Son of Man. I want you to go to my man. I want you to go to my men and women, my people. And so I think that it is a term of endearment, not only for Ezekiel, but for the people of whom Ezekiel is a son of. Yeah.
Ezekiel was what was called prophet.
A priest and prophet. He was of the priestly line.
There's many priests and prophets that
Yeah.
are close to God.
Yeah.
They talk to being and call them.
Yeah. It's neat to see the individual. We sometimes forget how individual these individuals are, and they have their own individual relationships with God. It's not like God just picks the next soldier. Okay, you go to that battlefield, you go to that battlefield. No, there's an intimate relationship. Jeremiah's relationship with God was not the same as Ezekiel's relationship with God. They were both God called prophets, and God said, go say this and go do it. There were similarities, but they had their own personal relationship. They had their own interactions. And so there are terms used of God to describe Jeremiah aren't used of Ezekiel. There are terms used to describe Ezekiel, like Son of Man, that God doesn't use to describe Jeremiah. And they're alive at the same time. Jeremiah is in Jerusalem, while Daniel and Ezekiel are in Babylon with all those captives. And so, yeah, so it's really neat to see how individually God works with these prophets and this individual relationship with them as he's sending them out to the Lord's people. Yeah, there you go. Another great example. Yeah. And he didn't say that about everyone. Yeah, so it's really that special relationship. So cool stuff. Any other reactions, thoughts, questions on the things we have considered this morning? If not, enjoyed very, very much. We will probably wrap up Job tomorrow. Not tomorrow, unless you really want to. Probably next Sunday, we will wrap up Job and get ready to move on from there towards the Exodus. So we'll go ahead and stop our screen share here, stop our share, stop our recording, and get ready to go before the Lord in song.